This is a new metric for Sharp Football Stats called Target and Output Adjusted Receiving Success, or Toars for short. And essentially what Toars looks at is it's basically looking at how successful a receiver is based on a combination of their success rate and their passer rating that they deliver to the quarterback, coupled by the number of times that they're targeted. So obviously if a guy is not targeted very much but has just a couple of great plays, we're trying to minimize that with this metric. We're trying to maximize when a guy is utilized a lot and produces great results. That's going to be a player who's going to sit at the top of the Tours ranking. So you can see a guy last year like Antonio Brown was one of the best in the NFL from that metric. But also note that like a guy like Eric Decker, Larry Fitzgerald, Jeremy Maclin, some guys that you may not think of as like the elite wide receivers last year, these are guys who were highly reliable, delivered very good successful play rates, and had very good ratings overall when they were targeted. So in this particular case, however, we are isolated to the regular season, okay, weeks 1 through 17, and I'm looking at pass attempts that were basically from around the midfield area into the opponent's territory. And I'm only looking at wide receivers here, and I'm looking at those players who had over 20 targets. So again, you can filter this any way that you would like to, but you can clearly see Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin near the top of this metric in terms of their proficiency. This is sorted right now by passer rating, so it's a more familiar statistic to you to see, but I've overlaid Tours and the Tours rating next to it so you can see where these players relate to based upon that metric. So if, for example, we wanted to look at tight ends instead of wide receivers using the same metric, I would not be surprised if Jordan Reed is right there at the top of this list because of how productive he was in the opponent's field zone. But let's go ahead and remove the wide receivers now, so that we will only be looking at tight ends. And we may have to scale this back just a little bit. Well, there's Jordan Reed right there. So Greg Olson's Tours score was 0.02 higher than Jordan Reed's, but otherwise Jordan Reed was number 2, Greg Olson number 3, Rob Gronkowski, Greg Olson number 1, Jordan Reed number 2, and Rob Gronkowski was number 3. So that should not really surprise very many people in terms of their Tours score. Gary Barnidge, a guy, his passer rating to him was only a 105, but his Tours score was 4th best in the NFL. So you can kind of get a sense of, in terms of the value of this metric. I think it's a really helpful metric. I think it's a really useful metric. For instance, it will degrade a guy like Scott Chandler, even though he delivered a higher passer rating. He wasn't targeted nearly as much, and so he's not quite as useful for you, whether you're using this for daily fantasy or other reasons. This Tours metric is pretty helpful.